It's a little too long.
Bit heavy, bit long.
Mm-hmm. It's one of those films where it is an impressive... What?
Bit heavy, bit long.
Shut up.
Sorry. I'm 5.
Welcome to part 2 of our MCU ranking video. We are now in our top 10, so this is where all the meatiness
It's a bit juicy at this point.
Oh yes, I love me some juice.
I love me some meat.
Yeah,
I'm not talking about
saw
meat.
that coming. So starting off with number 10, we have Doctor Strange. Now, I thought this was a really good film. I know you've got mixed feelings on the matter.
Yeah.
But having an origin story that focuses on like sorcery and the different dimensions the MCU have touched upon before was a very unique take on what the MCU could incorporate moving forward.
Yeah.
Doctor Strange as a character worked really well for me. I think Benedict Cumberbatch was perfect casting.
I think this was one of the ones that you would have even put higher than this, but
only by like maybe 1 or 2.
But for me, what it was, I will admit that the visuals were fucking breathtaking. Like, not since Inception was I like so impressed with visuals. But I don't know, I personally didn't really like Benedict Cumberbatch that much because I don't think he does a great American accent. And I thought, again, like we were saying with Black Panther, I just think that the origin story was quite formulaic and hit a lot of the same beats that they all hit. And so for me, it was, other than the visuals, nothing really stood out. The villain wasn't particularly memorable or anything like that. But I can completely see why people would love it. It's just not really my thing.
But all in all, because of how unique it is and visually impressive, it had to make our top 10.
At number 9, it's Spider-Man Homecoming. Now, this is one of my personal favourite MCU films. I remember when we saw Spider-Man in Civil War, I was extremely hyped to see his solo film. And for the most part, it really lives up. Yeah.
I think they do a great job in capturing how Peter Parker probably should have been portrayed in the first Spider-Man films. Tobey Maguire was great in his own right, as was Andrew Garfield, but the fact that it took them 3 attempts to cast an appropriately aged actor as Peter Parker is just baffling to me.
Yeah. They've always done that, though. Films set in high school, they always cast like older, like even Superbad, like I think half those actors, other than McLovin, I think all those actors were like mid-20s when they do it. It's just a weird thing. I think Michael Keaton at that point was one of the best villains in the MCU. The twist, I did not see coming.
No, I really liked what they did with his character and how to make him personally attached to Peter.
That's like a running theme with Peter Parker. Like most superheroes, they don't actually know their enemies like personally, but Peter Parker knows loads, like almost all of his enemies. Like he knows them as Peter Parker and as Spider-Man, which is a weird thing, but I liked how they kind of got around that. The John Hughes high school vibes were good, the comedy was good.
Ned as a character worked really well. It was great to give Peter a character to bounce off.
Yeah. The only thing really for me that I didn't like was I thought the action scenes could have been a bit better done. But, you know, that's a pretty small nitpick in what's essentially a good film.
I know a problem that some people will have with this interpretation of Peter Parker is he relies very heavily on Stark tech. It's incorporated into his suit a huge amount. I feel like this film, it was more forgivable than Far From Home, in which it like just continues to build upon. But yeah, I didn't mind it that much. I thought it helped stand out from the other interpretations of Spider-Man that we've seen in live action before.
Yeah.
So
you also saw him do some new stuff that we hadn't seen before, like he had his parachute wingsuit thing.
Yeah, he had his little spider drone as well to help scout out the spy. So
so it just reinvigorated the character for a new generation, I guess.
It was just nice to see the character back home where he belongs.
Yeah, Homecoming really is the perfect title.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's got the double meaning of that's what Americans call prom, and he's trying to get a date for the prom, but Homecoming, it just is the perfect title for that film.
Thank you, Sony, for doing the right thing.
Now do the same with fucking Craven.
At number 8, we have the film that started it all. It's Iron Man 1. Now, this came out at a time where we really needed Marvel to come out with something to counter DC's Batman trilogy.
Yeah, it came out the same year as The Dark Knight.
Yeah.
And for Iron Man to still be, you know, talked about and remembered really says a lot, because most of the superhero movies, if they came up against Dark Knight in the same year, they would get fucking buried.
And the fact that it works so well, Iron Man was not that huge a name before this film came out.
I think I have never read an Iron Man comic, but from what I hear, he was a C-list hero.
Exactly. Probably more than a C-list, but he
apparently
definitely
he was,
wasn't among people's favourites. I'd say it'd be the Spider-Man or the Wolverine or stuff like that.
Yeah.
But the fact that Robert Downey Jr. captured the character so perfectly and made people all over the world fall in love with this character.
Yeah.
It is perfect summary when you say that Robert Downey Jr. isn't playing Tony Stark. Tony Stark is playing Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah, it's like the whole Ryan Reynolds and Deadpool thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It really is. I remember seeing that Kevin Feige, someone asked him on Reddit, like, is there any decisions that you've really had to fight for? And he said the biggest thing was casting Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. Apparently a lot of the, studio heads didn't want to do it.
Well, due to his troubled past.
Yeah, but I'm so glad they came through because it really is perfect casting. To be honest, I'd say from this point on in the list, I don't have any flaws. This is a film where I really genuinely don't have any flaws with it. And it just says a lot about the MCU that there's films ranked higher than this, because this is a film I can watch and I really don't have a single issue with it.
I'd say maybe get a more inspired bad guy.
Yeah, that's maybe the only thing. But even then, I like that it's a lot more focused.
Well, this was before it became formulaic anyway, so it made sense.
Had a good soundtrack as well, lots of AC/DC and stuff like that. Some iconic imagery, like when he walks away from the explosion and the whole I am Iron Man moment.
He made Iron Man cool, which is all you could ask.
Yeah, definitely. At number 7, Avengers Endgame. Now, I think a lot of people will be wondering why it's so low. Essentially, the reason is because it's not the kind of film we're going to stick on all the time.
No. It is a very impressive film in its own right. It's the culmination of what is effectively 10 years of build-up.
Yeah.
And so, of course, you needed a film of this magnitude and at this length in order to pay off all these interwoven storylines and character arcs and do it in a satisfying way.
Yeah. I think in context of the MCU, it's everything it needed to be. But if you're thinking, I want to watch a Marvel film, what will I stick on? You're probably not going to go for a film where the first 2 hours are build-up.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and everyone's sad and in mourning.
Yeah, it's not got the happiest of tone. And like I say, in context of the MCU, it makes perfect sense. Yeah. But it's just not... I can't see myself watching it often.
It is an almost perfect ending. There are one or two things that they might have been able to do a bit better, like the pacing issues. But I think, like, for what we could ask for, it was the perfect send-off to this humongous storyline. It
was essentially an impossible task for the Russo brothers to satisfy everyone while also diverting expectations, and they passed with flying colours. Mm-hmm. I think, the action scenes, they might take a while to get there, but when they get there, they're memorable. It's got the humour.
The scale is massive.
Yeah, it's nuts. They balance all the characters really well. I love the ending to Captain America's story. Before the film, I predicted that was where it was going to go, but I'm glad they went there. Very few flaws with it, to be honest. The only real ones I have are, I wish that Bucky had become Captain America rather than Falcon, and I've seen people's reasoning why, because Falcon's kind of, since Winter Soldier, he's kind of been under Captain America's wing, ironically, because he's Falcon and he has wings, but he's got a purer heart, I guess. Like, he hasn't had that fractured past and stuff. So I can understand it, but it always felt to me like Bucky was kind of being lined up for it, and then last minute they gave it to Falcon. So I wasn't 100% happy with that, but that's pretty much my only issue with it.
I was happy with it. At number 6, we have Captain America: The Winter Soldier. This was probably the first solo film that I considered to be truly great.
Yeah, I think it really is. I think it took the MCU, well, in particular the Captain America trilogy, up to a whole new level.
Yeah. This was the Russo brothers' first outing in the superhero genre, and I think they passed it with flying colours.
Yeah, it's mental that they went from doing Community to this.
It was nice seeing the change in Captain America's character from the first Captain America film. Obviously, he grew more into modern society during the first Avengers film, but it was nice seeing him get to strut his stuff per se without anyone else stealing the spotlight for him.
Yeah, but it's weird. You say it's a solo film, and it is, but it's also, I like that Black Widow's in it and Falcon's in it, and Nick Fury has a really good part as well. I think,
but the focus is on Captain America.
Yeah, yeah, and I like his kind of bromance that he has with Falcon as well, and obviously the Bucky twist. I remember, now you forget that was even a twist, but at the time I remember being like, holy fuck. The action is really well shot.
Yep.
Like the stuff on the boat at the beginning.
The lift scene.
Yeah.
And his fights with the Winter Soldier are just
the one
so
towards
quick
the end as
and
well.
brutal, yeah.
Yeah, really well choreographed action. You really like feel the punches as well. It's one of those. Yeah, and again, another subgenre with the kind of spy thriller thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it really brought Captain America to a whole new level, and I think it was some of the best action we'd seen in the MCU at that point.
Mm-hmm. Great film.
Yeah. We're in the top 5 now, and we're kicking it off with Thor Ragnarok. This is a film that I've seen a lot. It's one of my most watched films in the MCU. I think I've seen it 4 times. I think it's got great humour, great visuals, a great soundtrack. They upgraded Thor's character.
Yeah, this is Thor's version of the Winter Soldier, where he was okay before, but this film is what truly brought him to life.
Yeah, and I think since this film, I've liked Thor a lot more. Like, Thor, from Thor up until Ragnarok, I never really cared about him that much, but from this and then seeing him in Infinity War and Endgame, he's one of my favourite MCU characters now. And I'm sure some people will not like the fact that he's kind of funnier now and stuff like that, but for me, I don't know, I love his upgrade. I love that they changed him up.
I think it's just because he seems much more genuine. Like, it's obvious they allowed Chris Hemsworth to play around with the character more.
He loses that way of like speaking that he used to speak with as well, like the whole like thou is from Asgard, and
but you can tell Hemsworth's more into it, and as a result, we then get more invested as well.
Yeah, if you can tell that an actor's having fun with a performance, it tends to translate well. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think Korg as well. I remember at every single line that Korg had, the entire cinema was just rolling laughing. Mm-hmm. That was great. Just some of the imagery, like the bit where Valkyrie, there's like a flashback of Valkyrie and all her army, and it just looks like a painting, the really slow-mo bit.
The flight of the Valkyries, yep.
Yeah, that looks just amazing. And I think Taika Waititi was a really interesting choice. Like, I would never have called, like, who should direct the next Thor? The guy that made Hunt for the Wilder People and What We Do in the Shadows. I never would have called that, but it worked perfectly. Mm-hmm. And I know Taika Waititi and Chris Hemsworth have both said they want to do a Thor 4. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I would be all for it.
Yeah, same here. At number 4, we have
Gardens of the Galaxy. Alan Titchmarsh.
At number 4, we have Guardians of the Galaxy 1. This was a very happy surprise when we saw this film.
Yeah.
All these characters I did not know at all. I was very unaware of their existence, and when I heard that they were making a Guardians of the Galaxy film, I was very questionable. But then when I went in and saw this, it was probably my favourite up to date.
I think this was the film where people knew they could just trust the MCU. Mm-hmm. Like, any new character...
They were getting to that point, yeah.
Yeah, any new character they introduced, they would make them likeable, they would make them interesting. James Gunn, again, like... I'm quite a big fan of James Gunn. He did a superhero film before this called Super, and he did a film called Slither, which were both good, but they were nothing like this. Mm-hmm. But yet he's got such a unique and clear vision. And after the whole thing happened where he got fired, and everyone was saying who's going to direct the third one, there was a reason everyone was questioning that, because nobody has the same voice as James Gunn.
Exactly. This has almost become his baby.
Yeah.
And having a great cast definitely helped matters. Having Chris Pratt as the lead, Zoe Saldana. Dave Bautista was probably the biggest surprise, because up until this point, he'd have like small roles in certain films, but this was his true standout moment, and I thought he killed it.
Yeah, he did. And I just want to say, Bradley Cooper as Rocket Raccoon is one of the coolest fucking characters not even in the MCU, but just in general. Like, anytime he's making jokes or he's doing some cool shit with a big gun. Yep. It's just awesome. Groot, of course, became like a cultural phenomenon.
Yep, gotta love Vin Diesel's suits. Yeah. Have you seen them on the red carpet where he's just rocking like a tree suit? What a guy.
I think it's got some really great visuals as well, like all the cosmic stuff just looks great. Again, obviously the soundtrack, like, other than maybe Baby Driver, this is just the one film that you think of where you go, okay, what's the film with a great soundtrack? Well, Guardians of the Galaxy. Yeah. Like, it's almost a character in itself. The villain could be a little stronger. Like, Ronan, you really don't see that much of him or get that much backstory to him.
He really seems like B tier.
He's Thanos' bitch, basically.
Yeah.
He's like, Thanos is like, I can't be asked doing this, you go do it. But yeah, it's just so fun. It's so rewatchable.
Yeah.
Like this, I think this is. I know I said I watched Ragnarok a lot. I think I've seen this about 7 or 8 times. I can stick it on pretty much whenever and have a great time with it. It's funny. It's investing. It's got a good story.
I think it's suitable for everyone as well. Like everyone would get something from this. It's just so fun, so wacky.
Yeah.
And so like unlike what had come before it in the MCU as well. So it's just like a great time all around.
At number 3, it's the Avengers, or as it's called in the UK, Avengers Assemble, even though no one ever calls it that.
That's true.
But yeah, this was a film for me where, again, I didn't see this film in cinemas because I wasn't into the MCU at this point. I didn't think I was aware of it. So I was just in HMV one day, picked up the DVD, went home and watched it, and I immediately fell in love with this universe to the point where I went and watched the Avengers, and then I went back to HMV and I bought every single film in the franchise that had come out before that point.
Yep.
I loved it. Now I'm aware of who Joss Whedon is, but at the time I wasn't. I love some of his work on Firefly, and what he does well there is he takes loads of different characters and balances them well, and that is something that he does perfectly in the Avengers. There are moments now that look a little bit cheesy, like Captain America's costume hasn't aged that well,
no.
and there are certain moments like when Hulk's like, I'm always angry, that are a little bit convenient, but in general, I think it's one of the best entries in the MCU. I think the dialogue's really interesting and snappy, the humour isn't forced, it just works really well. The whole third act is just fucking awesome.
It was the first superhero film that truly gave me a nerdgasm.
Yeah, and I know people will talk about the shot where it like circles around them all, and while that is iconic, for me, it's the bit after that when they're all fighting and
they're doing that one take, isn't it?
Yeah, and they all get a moment to shine. That's still my favourite part of the whole MCU, I would probably say. Again, it introduced characters like Black Widow properly. And Hawkeye.
It made sillier sounding characters like Hawkeye cool as well. And I think Jeremy Renner did a great job of that, because unlike the other actors, I guess you could say Mark Ruffalo because he got brought in last minute. He really, like, you could tell he was really invested in the character. He wanted to make it cool, and he did a very good job in doing so, I think.
Yeah, and Loki is a really good villain. At that point, he was easily the best villain the MCU had seen.
Yeah. No wonder they brought him back.
Yeah, I mean, he still holds up to this day. I mean, he outsmarts the Avengers. He's just cunning. He's
charismatic as fuck.
Exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, there's very few things wrong with this film. I think it won't age magnificently. I don't think it's quite as gritty or realistic as some of the ones that have come since. But in general, it's a really good time, and well paced. I love it.
Yeah.
And it really captures just the magic of the MCU better than, I would say it captures the magic of it, for me, better than any other film in the series.
If this film in particular had it have worked, I don't think the MCU would be the same as it is today.
No, absolutely not.
At number 2, we have Avengers Infinity War. Now, this, for me, was fantastic in the sense that we got to see it from the point of view of the villain. And it portrayed him as the protagonist, which I thought was excellent.
It should be called Thanos Infinity War.
It should, really, yeah. This was the first time I truly felt like I understood a villain, like every single decision he made, why he did what he did. And you can also, like, in a way, you can almost feel for him as well. You delve really deep into his backstory, and he's a very sympathetic villain. But at the same time, you can't help but just have a little bit of hate for him, just for some of the things he does. Real dickish move.
Did you mean it's the first time in the MCU that you'd really, like, felt for a villain, or just in general?
I don't know.
Fair enough.
Probably. Yeah. Definitely the MCU, not sure about general.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's got a few issues in terms of, like, tone, because sometimes you have a really serious scene followed by a really comedic scene. It doesn't always flow that well, but...
That just comes with juggling the sheer amount of characters that this film has.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you can't do that perfectly, but it comes as close to perfect as it could have done. It's got the humour, it's got the heart, it's got the action. Most characters get a time to shine. It introduced Thanos, who is, I think, pretty much, categorically accepted as being the best villain in the MCU, and I would maybe even say he's like the greatest villain we've had in cinema in a long time. Certainly the best comic book villain since Heath Ledger's Joker, and it's a film that will no doubt live on in pop culture for a long time.
One of the most shocking endings to a superhero film as
Yeah.
well, where the villain wins.
How did I forget that? Yeah, I remember like sitting in the cinema after that finished and no one fucking moved or said a word. Everyone just sat there like, what?
That was the closest to shell shock I've seen in the cinema.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, that was a unique experience for sure.
But yeah, definitely a very shocking film and a very ambitious film.
It also has an insanely high stakes. Like we've never seen before.
The biggest stakes we've ever seen. There's a reason that pretty much the whole MCU cast was brought into this film. And, I mean, I just don't think I'll ever see another film quite like it, to be fair.
No, I don't think we will. So that means number 1 is Captain America Civil War.
This is definitely my favourite. And the reason being, it's Avengers 2.5 for a start.
You could even argue this is what Age of Ultron could have been.
Yeah. It's the point where you get all these heroes together, which is something that Age of Ultron could have done. It could have tried to incorporate a couple more characters than just an effectively thrown in Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, and then Vision just pops up out of nowhere as well. But what this does is it brings Spider-Man to the MCU, which is just, thank you, Lord! And you also get great introductions to characters like Black Panther.
Yep.
The villain was kind of like how the Mandarin was for you. I enjoy the fact that this villain wasn't really a big bad like he's portrayed to be like in the comics. He's just like a master manipulator, and he manages to pit your heroes against one another, which I think was very interesting.
Yeah.
Seeing the throwdown between Iron Man and Captain America at the end was just like beautiful and yet heartbreaking at the same time. You're seeing it's like you're seeing your two best friends fight and you just don't know which to side with.
Yeah. I think it does a great job at showing both sides of the argument. Like, I genuinely couldn't tell you if I'm Team Cap or Team Iron Man.
No.
Because I can see both sides. Yeah, like you say, it introduced Black Panther as a fucking badass. They got Spider-Man fucking perfectly. It had the humour, but not in a forced way. And, you know, we were saying about Infinity War, it had all these heroes, but tonally it was a little bit unbalanced. For me, this film is perfectly balanced in terms of tone and character. I think the humour is good, but it's never too forced. The action is great, the story's gripping. It provides a really emotional climax with Tony and Captain America. For me, this is the film in the MCU that really encapsulates what it's all about. Like, at the heart of it, it's got good character drama, and it puts them first and foremost, but when the action comes, it is great, and it's memorable, it's got the laughs, it's got a little bit of magic. It's just, I don't know, for me, it's just like, if there's one film that I think fully encapsulates the tone of the MCU, for me, it's this one. Yeah,
it's a perfect blend of all the qualities you've grown to know and love about the MCU, and it doesn't really have any drawbacks to it.
No, I mean, the only one I would have would be the fact that it doesn't really have... Well, it's not the fact that it doesn't have a villain, because I wouldn't mind that, but it's the fact that the villain is a little bit weak, but just because they don't go and fight against him, the fact that he makes them fight against each other is almost more interesting, so I can forgive it.
I'd say the one very nitpicky flaw I have is that it doesn't really show off the heroes as being equals, which they're not. Like, the power levels are different anyway, but when it comes to the airport scene in particular, I don't remember Vision taking part that much, and you can tell that the reason behind that is he'd deck everybody. Like, apart from Scarlet Witch, who only seems to like show up when she is kicking someone's ass. Like, when you have the power to just stop someone and fling them, which effectively is the major drawback to having someone like Black Widow or Hawkeye, who might be a bit more hand-to-hand based, you're just no match for her.
Yeah.
So I feel like, in terms of power scale, it was a bit off at times, but just seeing that throwdown between what is effectively 12 of your favourite characters was just such a badass.
I mean, you can see why the Russo brothers were given the reins to the Avengers movies after this, and it's, you know, this is one of the most hyped, other than, you know, Endgame and Infinity War, this is one of the most hyped films I can remember. Like, everyone I knew was excited for this, and I don't think anybody left disappointed. This, for me as well, you know, I said I got into the MCU quite late. This was the first film for me that I really remember being, like, excited for. I went to see Age of Ultron, but I don't even think I watched a trailer. I think I just went with you guys because you were going. And then I sort of got into it after that when Ant-Man came out and stuff like that. And so this was the film where I was, like, dying to see it. And I left that cinema absolutely buzzing, mostly because of Spider-Man and just how fucking hyped I was for that. But yeah, it hit all the right notes. It was emotional. It was funny. It was action-packed. It was just everything that a good MCU film should be.
Molto bene.
So that's our list. Let us know if you agree with it. Thanks a lot for watching.
There you go. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. It'll be much appreciated. We value your support so, so much. We have more content on the way, so stay tuned. Until then, I'm Matt.
I'm Dan.
Goodbye.